months ago. I don't know if it was Carol or Ann.
Yeah.
It was like when I was on paternity leave. And I don't know, but it was like, I can do May or April. Like it was so long ago, it felt like eternity, and now it's here. So time has moved fast. This is very tall, and I do have 7-month-old twins at home. And yeah, I just want to share with y'all a little bit about my story tonight, so you can get to know me better. This is like, you know how politicians have stump speeches? I have my church stump speech. Y'all are really like the last ones hearing the stump speech. So some of you, if you've been to On Point or different environments, you might have heard it already, but I'll try to make it a little unique. So I just want to introduce myself, talk about my story a little bit, and I want to hear from you. And so a few quick facts. I'm new to Nashville, so I'm one of the new people in town. I have twins, newborn twins. Well, they're not newborns anymore. And I collect typewriters. And every time I say that, somebody's like, I have one in the garbage in my house or in the attic, and you can have it.
You and Tom Hanks, apparently.
Tom Hanks collects them as well, and he loves the typewriter. There's a typewriter shop in town, which is pretty rare for a city to have a typewriter shop. Tom Hanks stops by regularly and signs stuff. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my life tonight, but I actually have an activity for y'all so that I can get to know you better. Because I was telling them I know about Stephen Ministry and I know how to refer people, but I don't know who I'm referring them to until now. And you know, it was good because if I knew Scott was a Stephen minister, I might not have been referring to him. You know, so, just kidding. So yeah, it's exciting to put faces with people who are caring so much for others. So thank y'all for your work. I know it is oftentimes behind the scenes, so we're very grateful for you. So here's the activity. How will you help me set up the table? Sure. So here's what I want you to think about. It's this question: why are you?
Would I want to be a church custodian?
Why would you want to be a church custodian? And in my last church, I had to move all the chairs myself. So it's amazing to have like people set up rooms here. So I don't take it for granted. So I want you to think about this: why are you a Stephen minister? Why are you a Stephen minister? And this group is actually, it's an okay size. Most groups I can't do this with because they're too large or whatever. So I have a lot of pictures. So if you're like a creative person, this is going to be fine. And if you're a very literal person, it's going to stretch you. I have a lot of pictures. So what we're going to do is I'm going to spread these out. And you're going to choose a card that illustrates why you're a Stephen minister. Some of them, you know, you'll see. You'll see. So come on up, grab a card, and then we're going to share briefly and quickly.
All right.
Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to go around. If you'll say your name, show your picture, or tell us what the picture is, and 1 or 2 sentences, okay? Otherwise, I might be here all night. 1 or 2 sentences of how this picture illustrates why you are a Stephen minister. Okay? We're gonna start in the back.
Yes.
Mike.
Nice. Picture a girl with a hand in front of her face, like stop. We were asked several times to be Stephen ministers and kept saying no, and finally we finally thought, you know, we're being asked. I think this is the place we're supposed to be. It was kind of scary for me to do one-on-one, right, kind of in a group.
Okay. It's a dog.
Oh, it's not just any dog.
Huh?
It's a golden.
It was a golden. It's a special dog. I relate to this because I want everyone to feel as welcomed, you know, as a Stephen minister, to have a place that you can talk. Just like dogs are loving and forgiving no matter how you are. So anyway, that one's spoke to me. You get that, right?
Yes, dear.
Hi there. Ralph Chumbly, and mine is a picture of a little seedling. Bev and I have only been here in Middle Tennessee for 5 years, and I felt like I was kind of like a seed. I had some skills and things to share, but I needed to get planted somewhere. So this is where we got planted, and I hope we're doing a little bit growing.
Yeah.
Yes, that's great. That's awesome.
Bill Jager. This is a very strange little picture here, but it really is representative of where I was. I was a recent widower, and I didn't know where I was and what I could do. A friend of mine said, "Go talk to this guy here. He knows everything."
He chose the same photo.
Oh, did he really? And, and I said, "There's no way on earth I will ever become a Stevens minister." And then I was goaded into it. The best thing I ever did, by far.
Okay, Scott, we'll jump back to Scott because he.
Okay. This little baby is home alone crying. And I'm always saying you never know what's going on behind someone's front door, and you need help, and you're not supposed to do it alone.
There you go. Nice.
Yes.
Janet Jameson, and I picked this picture of roots of a tree because that represents to me so much of what Stephen Ministry does, which is to try to come alongside people, help them get those roots down into Christ, who is the ultimate caregiver as we.
That's beautiful.
That's wonderful. I'm Debbie Slocum, and I picked the two friends. When I've gone through hard times in my life, I isolate, and I became a Stevens minister because I didn't want everybody to isolate, or anybody to isolate.
Yep.
I'm Courtney Peterson. This is my photo.
Oh.
And to me, that looked like a lonely road to walk down. And so I wanted to at least help a couple people not walk down those roads by themselves.
Oh,
Joe Rogers. I cheated.
Okay, I told her she couldn't take two, but he didn't ask me. He didn't ask me.
I didn't ask. So instead of asking, I'm going to just apologize for breaking the rules. Two pictures. One is a hand holding some kind of a crustacean. The other is an old man holding a baby. And I picked these because they're both about connecting in different ways, very different ways. But connecting, I'm thinking of connecting among each other and also with our care receivers.
Me, Gina Brawley, and I got the lonely puppy because I am the woman who will stop on the side of the road and pick them up because I know that I can one-on-one take care of them, help them, give them a place. And that's what I feel about Stephen Ministries, that I might not have the most skills or the best skills, but I can hold your hand. Or your paw.
I have the clock, and I chose the clock because I have time, and I wanted to know what can I do with the time, and so I wanted to make lonely people happy. So this is.
That was beautiful.
I'm Carol Mangione, and I chose the broken mirror. The broken mirror. And because I'm broken, and so are the people that I'm walking with, and together with Christ, there can be some huge healing. So it's really sweet.
I'm Lisa Sabia, and I've got the older person with the baby, and I just think everybody's important, from the old to the young, although we don't serve the young ones like this, but everybody is important, and everybody needs to be helped at some point in their lives to comfort it.
I'm James Sharp, and I picked the dominoes, which appear to be falling, and I think that that's what we find with our Stephen ministers is when they come to us. Usually it starts with one domino, but there are many dominoes that are falling. We're just there to help them, pick them up or set them back up, whichever.
I'm Ann Adams, and I chose the people holding hands. Looks like one's an adult and one's a child's hand. Because that's what we do. We come alongside people and listen to them and pray with them. And at the end of the day, we're all just walking each other home.
guys.
Yeah.
So we did, Bill and I chose the same photograph, maybe for slightly different reasons. I guess I see this in a twofold way. One, some of you have alluded to that we identify people who are walking through a problem, through a challenging time in their life alone. And as Cheryl often says, wouldn't it be easier if they had someone to walk down that road instead of doing it alone? And I guess the other side of this I see is just the reason why we're all here. We sort of, some of us I think have been searching for a place of genuine service where we felt like our gifts would be really used well, and all of us have had jobs in the church that are just where we've just been miserable and
what?
and ill-fitted with our gifts.
That's him speaking, not the rest of us.
So I think when people find their place in service, I think that's probably when they're at their best.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Where's your
turn? Well, I'm not a Stephen minister, so I don't know.
Everybody's a Stephen minister.
You're going to hear about me. You're going to hear about me. So, what I'm going to, you can just hold them for an hour, pass them, and we'll stack them up. Thank y'all for helping me get to know you better. And what I want to do now is just share a little bit about my life, and I'm going to narrate my life in this way. I want to talk about things God has used to help me grow as a disciple of Christ. So I am the director of adult discipleship. If you didn't know what I do on staff, each pastor does have a little niche, and then of course we do the general things like meeting with people and preaching and pastoral care and stuff. And so I'm going to give you a definition of disciple. There we go. Of disciple that I like, because there's a lot of churchy words and we don't always define them. We just use them: disciple, grace, all this stuff. So I heard this one many years ago, and it's pretty simple, but I like it. It said a disciple. Sorry, this isn't. You can't see it well. A follower of Christ whose life is centering on loving God and others.
Make sure they're,
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. So this is the definition. I won't rewrite it right now. I have terrible handwriting. My wife is always embarrassed when I write things on the board. So it's an active thing, being a follower. You're following someone specific, Jesus Christ. And then if you think about the goal, it's not something with an endpoint. It's ongoing. So it's growing until your life is centering on loving God and others. That's the Great Commandment. That is the goal of being a disciple, being formed into the likeness of Christ. So when I think about my life, there are a number of things that have helped shape me as a disciple and help me grow. And so the very first thing, and I'm going to use alliteration here because I'm a preacher. The very first thing is the church. I think the church is very important. I've dedicated my life to the church. And I grew up in the United Methodist Church, Conyers First United Methodist Church in Conyers, Georgia, so to the east of Atlanta towards Athens. I was baptized as an infant there. My kids have not been baptized yet. They're going to get baptized in June. The pandemic has messed up many things. Patrick, even though he's 3, he's going to get it done. And I was baptized as an infant. Of course, I don't remember it. But we do the liturgy regularly, and so I know what happened there. I know that at my church, the congregation that day made promises, right? They made promises to help raise me in the faith until one day I'd be confirmed. I'd confirm my faith, profess faith in Christ for myself. And so the church for me growing up, and I don't know if you see this in your work, but for a lot of people have trauma associated with the church because they have terrible church experiences. We had somebody come on the men's retreat who had attended here one Sunday, and then they signed up for the men's retreat. And I was like, that's bold, because you don't, like, churches can be wild places, you know, like, you don't know us yet, but you signed up. So I'm like, you know, you never know what you're going to get when you step into a church. But thankfully for me, my experience growing up was that the church was a place of love, of care, of grace. The people loved me. I was taught about God's love, and it was a place I wanted to be. And the church really took their vows seriously. It was a very intergenerational church like this one, with old and young and everybody in between. And people knew who I was, or they knew my parents, or they, you know, tell on me when I ate too many cookies at VBS. You know, it was a kind of a community of people. And so the church was very special for me. But it wasn't, I don't remember a lot about children's ministry or things I learned. I don't have a great memory, actually. So I don't remember a lot about that, but I do remember when I was going into the late elementary school, I went to church camp with my cousins in North Carolina. And if you went to church camp, you know what happens on the last night of camp? Usually they're like, do you want to dedicate your life to Christ? And I was young, and I remember talking to the counselor and saying, like, what does that mean? Or what, I don't, like, what does it mean, dedicate or, you know, commit your life? And he talked about sin, wrong things, and it's like, you know, as a kid, I knew I'd done wrong. I'm the youngest of 3 boys. I'd done plenty wrong, hit, and all sorts of stuff. And he said, you know, if you want forgiveness, Jesus offers that through the cross. And I was like, sounds good to me. Sign me up, you know, raise my hand. And of course, I didn't fully understand what I was committing my life to. I didn't know a lot about Jesus. I knew Jesus loved me. I didn't know everything he wanted for my life or wanted me to do or not do. But for me, in my conscious memory, that was the beginning of my faith journey. Now, some faith traditions, I would say, you know, baptism or committing your life to Christ, that's kind of viewed as the goal, right? The end of the journey. But as Methodists, typically we view that as really the beginning of the journey. Of course, God is drawing all people into a relationship. And then when we say yes to Jesus, that's the starting line of what's to come. And so that's really what it's been throughout my life. So camp was a big thing. And then I was the youngest of 3, and I talked about this in my sermon a few weeks ago. But another huge influence, another group of people God used in my life were volunteers in my youth group. My youth group, they did not, you know, everything you answered, it was like the reason why they were all leading, right? They had time. They were looking for their place. They were broken, and they wanted to help broken kids, and they just committed themselves to me. 3 guys in particular, before Matt, Bubba, Joey, and Don. I keep up with most of them still. And we'd go to Mrs. Winter's Chicken and Biscuits for prayer breakfast every Thursday. I'd ask them my questions about life. They'd help give me answers. In my household, actually, we didn't talk about faith much growing up. We went to church, but we didn't really talk about faith at home. We didn't talk about politics at home. It was, you know, we just had a quiet home life, and that was okay. So all my questions I didn't want to ask my parents about anything, I talked to the youth leaders, and they were amazing, and they helped me begin to understand that Jesus didn't just want part of my life, that Jesus wanted my whole life, and about growing in grace and reading the Bible and how to pray and all these kinds of things. You know, I didn't know anything about it, and so these committed volunteers that God sent into my life made a profound impact on who I am today. And so during that time, when I was in middle school, is actually when I felt a call to ministry. So if I were to choose a card about why I'm in ministry today, oh man, this is kind of hard, isn't it? I don't know. Okay, it's this guy jumping off a cliff here. And when I was in middle school, I just had this inner sense that God was calling me to be a pastor. And now in my mind at that time, I didn't know what pastors did. I just knew they preached. And that's what I felt like God was calling me to preach. Like, that was the main thing I thought they did. Of course, they do lots of other things. But it was really weird, right? You don't tell people that when you're in middle school. And because everybody wants to be cool things, not pastors. But my aunt is actually a United Methodist pastor, and so I reached out to her. And I never talked to her about any of this, but I said, you know, this is kind of weird, but like, I feel like God might be calling me. And I'll never forget, she said, you know, your grandmother and I have talked about that for your life before. I was like, what? Why didn't y'all tell me? What else y'all talking about? I don't know. And I was like, well, what do I do? And she said, well, you stay involved in the church, see where God leads you, take on leadership opportunities, figure out your gifts, your spiritual gifts, and just take it a day at a time. I was like, okay. So I kind of like, you know, put that in my pocket and said, all right, God, we'll see. And continued to be involved in the youth group and went on mission trips all over the world and the country and serving in so many different ways. And it was really good. And then it came time for college, and I'm like, okay, well, what do you do with college if you're feeling called to be a pastor? And so I called my aunt again. I'm like, well, what? She said, well, actually, just major in whatever you want to major in, because if you go to divinity school, you'll get the theology there. And a lot of pastors don't know much about anything, so just, you know, get a good major. You know, get well-rounded. And I said, okay. And so, funny enough, my family didn't talk about politics at home, but I was a political science major. It has always been very interesting to me. And so I went to college, went to Furman University in Greenville, South Carolina, and began getting involved in everything there. And I would say generally I have had, especially up to that point, I had a very easy life. I mean, my grandmother died when I was young, but by and large, you know, I'd have to look back now, like, is there any trauma I've blocked out? But like, you know, pretty good life. But it was in college, my freshman year, that things began to, or freshman year and beyond, that things began to get a little more challenging, because my youth pastor, who was included in this group, who was so influential to me, he was arrested in an undercover police operation with a police officer posing as a young woman on the internet, like To Catch a Predator style. So then I'm like, oh wow, what does that mean? Like, for my faith, and a leader in the church has fallen from grace, and like, is what he taught me true, or can I believe it, or like, how do you reconcile all those things? So that was very difficult. I mean, that was the most difficult thing I'd experienced in my life up to that point. Then when I was later in college, I began to have some mental health struggles. I couldn't figure it out at the time. It was kind of depression, is what the counselors kind of called it. And, you know, I grew up in the era before mental health was like popular, right? I mean, you all did too. I was at the tail end, like, I'm young, but I was at the tail end. Like, now it's like everywhere people talk about it, there's a lot less stigma. But even when I was in college, no one was talking about mental health. So I remember one day I just called my mom and I said, Mom, I'm going to a counselor. Things are bad. And she's like, oh, okay, go. Like, what? And I was just like, I have to go. I don't know what else to do. And went to a counselor and started getting help there. And that was helpful. But just had some challenges along the way. And, you know, most of my life up to this point, I felt like God was very close to me. My church was a very heart faith. Churches kind of sometimes have different, like some churches are very like hands, like we're very mission oriented. Some are very head, like we're very head oriented, and knowledge is the best thing. My home church was like heart, like we weren't reading a lot of books, we were serving, but it was like you felt God's love, you felt God's closeness. And then when I hit college, I was like, wow, especially when I was depressed, I didn't feel close to God. I didn't feel like God was answering my prayers or hearing my prayers anymore, which is a very rattling experience if you've ever had that. If you felt like God was close and then you felt like God was far, you're like, is it God or is it me? I mean, these are big existential questions that were happening. And so during that time, I would say what God really used to help me was community. I had developed some close friendships in college, and so eventually I could open up to them about these things, and I had friends that I could pray with, and we went to church even when we didn't feel like going, and I had a campus ministry that I was a part of that kind of helped ground me. So it was God sending people in my life to help kind of shape me and help me get through these crises that I was having. And it was in the campus ministry that I met my wife, Emily. She was a freshman, I was a senior, and you know, I was a senior, and I knew I was probably going to seminary, so I wasn't thinking about the freshman girls much. So I thought about her a little bit, but then we didn't date for many years later, so we'll just put a placeholder there. So met Emily. During all this challenging time, I'm trying to figure out about sin. I'm like, God, wait, you called me to ministry, and now I'm praying and I feel like I can't get an answer, which is very tough, right? Because grad school is not cheap, and like, it's a big step. And so I just had to take things a day at a time, like trust God. And I was like, God, I felt like when I was young, I was jumping off a cliff. I've heard you clearly in the past. I can't hear you clearly now. I'm going to continue down the path in faith. And that's what I did. I went to Duke Divinity School in Durham, North Carolina, enrolled there. And like I said, I hadn't read a lot of Christian books and things like that growing up. And so another thing that God used to shape my life was classes. I love studying. I love learning. I love reading. Like when I'm writing a sermon, it's like I could read for 3 weeks, but eventually you have to, write something. And not just read and think about stuff. And so, but the classes were so shaping for my faith and encouraging. And I felt a renewed sense of my calling. And I did some internships while I was there with Peachtree Road United Methodist Church, which is kind of the Brentwood equivalent in Tennessee, in Atlanta. It's kind of a similar church to Brentwood there. Huge facility right in downtown Buckhead. And then the next summer I worked for the Methodist Church of El Salvador, which was the exact opposite. Pastors walking miles to their church, not getting paid. We're building the church buildings. We're hosting teams. Hugely different context, but through all of that, God was shaping me who I am today. I learned Spanish that summer and was able to, been able to use that in ministry. So God was shaping me. And during that season, I did feel a renewed sense of God's calling in my life, and was like, okay. And so I started the ordination process in the Methodist Church, which is like too complicated to even talk about the last years. But I began that process, and soon I was sent to, when I graduated seminary, Hamilton Mill United Methodist Church, north of Atlanta in Beaufort, Georgia. And it's in Gwinnett County near Lawrenceville, where Davis was. So that's when I first met Davis, when I graduated from seminary many years ago now. And he was a pastor at Lawrenceville Methodist. We were another church in town nearby. And so I served for 5 years as an associate there. And whenever I was speaking to groups like the Steve Ministers or others, I would be telling about myself, and I would say I'm single. And guess what happened? Everybody had a niece. I was like, oh, he's single. Okay. That's a perfect age, And that can get complicated. Many areas it can get complicated, ethically, practically. And I was like, I don't know. I need to not date people who are related to others in this church. And so I thought, it's like, I could do online dating or whatever. And I was like, well, what if there's this girl, Emily? I remember her from Furman. And we had kept up on social media, stayed friends, but I didn't know what she was doing or what she was up to. And so I reached out to her, and I found out she was living in Atlanta at the time, which wasn't far from me, and asked her on a date, and we started dating. And figured out she had a crush on me when she was at Furman, but I didn't know. And we dated for many years because I had commitment issues to work through. And so Doug and Pat were waiting, and my parents were waiting a long time. Emily was waiting, and eventually we were married here at Brentwood. Davis and my aunt performed the wedding together, and so we were married in 2017. And during that season, I had been an associate for 5 years. We were getting married, and we wanted to move on our own because it's an interesting dynamic. Like when I was the young single pastor, and so now I was going to be married, and I knew that would be hard for the church to adapt to a little bit because they were used to me being at the church every evening. I was single and had time, and Emily and I were like, let's start our new life together in a new environment. And very much, she views herself as a partner in ministry, using her spiritual gifts wherever she can. And so soon I said to the bishop and higher ups, I want to move. And so I went south of Atlanta to McDonough, Georgia, where I served as the senior pastor, the solo pastor, the only pastor of Harvest Point United Methodist Church for 5 years. And I followed the founding pastor, who'd been there 17 years, so that's fun. And the church was a very young church, so it was only 17 years old. They had only been in their permanent building for about 2 years before I got there. So very different than, 100-plus-year-old context. We'd say like, well, what did y'all do last year? And they're like, we don't remember, let's do something new. It's like the memory was very short. But of course, following the founding pastor was challenging. We used to pray for no snow, because do you know what happens in a church when it snows on a Sunday? When finances are tight, you can't collect an offering.
No.
And you can't pay bills when you're living month to month. So, I mean, it was stressful times, right? I mean, you're like, we got to make a mortgage payment. We got to have that. And there was a lot of challenges. And then, of course, you have COVID in the mix. So then COVID comes. We don't have a video camera, and we're just at the edge of development, so we don't have high-speed internet. There's a Starbucks 2 miles down the road, but we don't have high-speed internet on our road. So we live streamed from my home office for a little while till we got things figured out, and we bought video cameras and figured it out. And then, people were mad about masks and leftover masks, and people were mad that you know how it was. You know how it was. So that was how it was in that environment. And then right before the pandemic, our son Patrick was born. He's now 3. And so there was a lot of challenges, but I would say one of the things God used to grow me as a disciple during that time was the challenges. I mean, my faith, my reliance, a lot of times you can get by on your natural gifts and talents so far, but there was a surrender of like, God, I can't do this on my own. Like, I can't make it. We need your help. And so God used the challenges to help shape me and shape us during that season. And it was great ministry. Recently I look back, and when I was there, baptized 13 adults, never new to the faith, new to the church during my time there. And it was awesome. So it was a lot of great things. But then again, coming out of the pandemic, getting settled again, Emily and I have been praying, okay, God, what's next for our family? Do we want more kids? And we felt pretty confident about that. And as we were thinking about it, we had a sense that we wanted to move to Nashville area to be near her family as we grew our family. I knew in the next season I wanted and needed something different after 5 years of leading through challenges and through COVID. And so I met with my district superintendent, and I'd said, we're moving to Nashville. And he's like, well, what are you going to do there? I said, I don't know, but we're moving. And that began the process. And so began praying and discerning and talking with different people about, okay, what are different opportunities in the area? Met with Davis. And then over time, things shaped that they had some roles coming open, and he's good friends with the bishop. So I met with the bishop, and things kind of came together, but it was through a big step of faith of deciding, okay, we're going to move here, and trusting that things were going to work out and be okay. And they've been great so far. So moved here in July. We live over towards Nippers Corner, so not too far from here. We live near the in-laws, which is amazing for twins. And the church has been super welcoming, and been kind of getting settled into everything in the area of discipleship. And so for me, when I look at my life, a lot of the stuff, when I think about how God has worked in my life, even though when I was young, I was like, okay, I feel like I preach. I love preaching. I love teaching. It wasn't any of that stuff that was the major influence. It was people. It was community. It was like somebody walking alongside of me, like y'all said. It was those things that helped shape me. And sometimes I ask this, but I ask, like, can you name 5 sermons you've heard in your life? Like, can you remember 5 sermons? Most people cannot remember 5 sermons, which is okay. That's okay. I don't feel bad about that. But, and I'm going to have you do this before you go to your small groups. I want you to think about what is one main thing God has used in your life to help you grow in your faith. Maybe it's one of these things. Maybe it's Bible study. Maybe it's prayer. Maybe it's your grandmother. I don't know. But I want you to think about your own life of how God has shaped you as a disciple and grown you. But for me, a lot of it comes back to community. It comes back to walking with other people, sitting with other people, praying with other people, crying with other people. And so when I think about discipleship and adult discipleship, that image of walking along the road with someone else, like the road to Emmaus, coming in groups together, that's what I'm passionate about, because that's what God's used in my life. And we weren't created to be alone. And God wants to draw us into community. And so here we're going to be figuring out ways to continue to do that, like we've been doing for many years here. We're going to try new things to bring people into community, to help them grow in Christ and see where God leads. So that is that's a little of my story. And here's what I want you to do. I'm gonna have this marker, and I want you to think about one thing in your life God has used to help grow your faith. And then just I'll put it here, but just write it up here. So who wants to go first? Jane is going first. One thing. Okay. And then while she's doing that, if you have any questions about me, the church, my job here, anything, you can ask them while people are writing things up here. But I'm curious to see like what God has used for your life, because it's probably going to be very different. So any family, we got it. Any questions or reflections or thoughts or?
So did you decide to move up to Nashville before or after you found out you were having twins?
We decided to move before Emily was even pregnant. Yeah. And then when we found out it was twins, we said, thank God. I mean, yeah, when we found out it was twins, it was like, that was confirmation of like, wow, we would have not have survived. So yes, that was before twins. It was about 6 months before we knew we were having twins.
Oh, yeah, there's that.
So yeah.
Carol and Andersen.
What?
What did you say?
It's 2 words.
Yeah.
Adversity / vomit.
You know what she means?
Okay.
Adversity / vomit. There's a story.
It is vomit.
It is.
See, now everyone's going to ask her in private of like,
And that's
what is-
totally cool.
Yeah. Vomit didn't make me, it's not, it doesn't start with a C. It's falling out of here.
You guys are right off in
He was gonna get your word.
He was gonna get your word.
Yeah.
He was husband. Very cool.
Yeah.
Great motivator.
Yeah, you don't have to write it.
That's the one out.
Nobody put enemies yet.
Absolutely. Oh, she was just sharing something that just passed, and yeah, I love that. That's a true statement right there.
Right.
Thank you.
Angels.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because Mike's which is so cool. Clear cut. Don't do a route.
Jonathan, that's very smart. I mean, I just think you're the last meeting, cut your time down a bit.
Yeah, right?
It should, you do great.
Yeah.
You know, Doug Rawls teaches a lot of classes. He taught me something. He said, you know, people love to talk about themselves.
Yes, they do.
It's good, but I love to learn about people. So it's nice for me to.
Chances. What'd you write, Joe?
Influence of ministers.
Influence of ministers.
I've had some incredible.
You can draw a picture out.
We've got some good ones here too.
Those are some of them.
It's always so interesting because they're not the same. You know, people, it's very different, very different things depending on your life story.
Even in-laws.
Why would I have done that?
I don't know, I'll ask Carol.
Okay, yeah, no pressure. Yeah, interesting that adversity, crisis, challenges, which makes sense for this group of people, right? That has been, you know, it wasn't like that led you away from everything, you know, it was maybe God met you there or helped draw you closer. Now, this is part of your ministry, so yeah, and I want to encourage you, you know, if you're feeling stagnant in your faith, I don't encourage people to pray for crisis in their life. But there are other means of grace like prayer, Bible study, worship. But yeah, if you're feeling stagnant, I just want to encourage you to continue growing in your faith. And if there's anything I can do to help you, would love to be a part of that. If there's any ways I can help your ministry, I have your cards and your brochures. And you know, Skip, every men's gathering, he is always repping Stephen Ministers on the retreat. He gave a good plug, and we see a lot of guys in need, and I know that's a hard group to get to take a step of faith, but we're going to continue to encourage that. So, any other questions or?
Did you say from the beginning you weren't sure how the referral process worked?
No. I was saying I didn't know who is referred to. Who? Like I didn't within this. Who within our church?
He didn't know who we were.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
I didn't know.
What are faces?
If I have a referral and it goes to the right place, I know the number. Yes, I didn't know who she sends them to. I knew it was a Stephen Ministers.
Got it.
But there's not a wall of pictures of you.
There's not a wall of fame.
Thank goodness.
You can work on that.
Yeah, we can work on that.
So that's what I was saying earlier. That's what I was saying. So, well, thank you all for having me.
Thank you.